I waited for the protagonist to come and save the princess. But after a long time, the protagonist still didn't come. I carefully analyzed the reasons and found that I accidentally changed the plot of the story. When I was still thinking of a solution, the princess suddenly pounced on me. Outside the room, the brave, who was supposed to come to the door of my room, was also guided back to the Duke's mansion hall by the maid. In an unknown room, two mysterious maids are preparing to embark on a mysterious plan.
After Celicia drank black tea containing magic potion and fainted, Moen stayed in the room the whole time. He was waiting for the brave Ariel to break into his room and save the princess, and then his plot in the novel could end here. However, it was already time for Ariel to appear, but she didn't enter the room. Moen took out his silver pocket watch and confirmed the current time. What's going on here? Moen sat on the table with his clothes and pants off, looking at the time on his pocket watch with great confusion. He found that Ariel's appearance time had already passed a long time ago. He didn't understand why Ariel hadn't appeared yet. Half an hour has passed, according to the original plot. Shouldn't Ariel rush in quickly to save the princess and control me? What's going on now? Where is she? Suddenly, Moen seemed to remember something. He pinched his chin with his hand and recalled the original plot of the novel. Wait a minute. How was the plot of this section originally written? Little by little, Moen combed through the development of the story's plot, presenting several familiar images in his mind. In his recollection, a blonde maid didn't hold the tray steady and accidentally poured tea on Ariel's dress. He muttered to himself as he recalled it. If I remember correctly, it seems like Ariel's skirt was accidentally soiled by a very sick maid in the Duke's mansion. Later, this guy was on her way to the bathroom to find something to clean her dress. She noticed something unusual and looked me, who was about to do something indescribable to the princess, Pooh, the original Moen Campbell. Recalling this, Moen realized that there was something wrong with this whole incident. Wait a minute, a very sick maid? He furrowed his brows and opened his mouth slightly in surprise, sensing that something was not quite right. Noel. He loudly called out the name of the maid Noel. Yesterday, due to illness, she didn't see the road in front of her clearly and accidentally bumped into him. He noticed that she was still working while sick, so he asked her to go back to her room to rest and recruited new maids from outside to replace all the sick maids in the house. She must still be in her room at this hour. At this moment, Moen realized that he had already changed the plot of the original novel. He nervously turned around and looked at Celicia lying on the sofa, feeling lost in the current situation. Gosh, isn't this equivalent to changing the original storyline? Celicia is still in a coma. Her face was flushed, her eyes closed, and her eyebrows were lowered, as if she felt discomfort in her body. Moen suddenly panicked when the story changed direction. He didn't know what to do next. If the original storyline is not followed, there is a high possibility that major events will occur in the subsequent development of the story. This is a huge problem, he called out softly. He turned his head and sat in place, anxious. However, at this moment, Celicia opened her eyes groggily. She unconsciously activated the ice magic, emitting a terrifying chill, and slowly sat up from the sofa. She stared at Moen's back with very terrifying eyes and walked towards him. At this moment, Moen was still immersed in his own world, not realizing that Celicia had already woken up. He lowered his head, covered his mouth with his hand, and quickly thought about the next solution. Calm down. Although something went wrong unexpectedly, the most crucial princess had already fainted. There must be a remedy now. Celicia's ice magic has spread behind Moen. At this moment, he felt that the temperature in his room seemed a bit different. The room that was originally somewhat hot was slowly starting to get colder at this point. He turned his head to the side and said in confusion, Why does the temperature seem to suddenly drop? The summer shouldn't be. Before Moen could finish speaking, he saw a pair of hands stretched out in front of him. He was very surprised and opened his eyes wide. Suddenly, Celicia unconsciously unleashed ice magic of greater intensity. The blue magical energy blasted all the furniture in Moen's room away. The entire room was instantly enveloped in a large amount of coldness. Due to the overly powerful magic she unleashed, Moen's room was covered in ice crystals everywhere. The temperature of the room instantly plummeted to the same as an ice cellar. Moen didn't have time to react just now before he was already pounced on by Celicia. Her entire body was now pressed on top of him, and from time to time, she was still emitting some cold air. Moen was frightened by Celicia's sudden action. He was so nervous that he couldn't even feel the temperature in the room. He looked at her in great surprise and didn't dare to sit up. He thought she already knew that he had poured something strange into the tea, so she was very angry and wanted to punish him. He explained to her very anxiously, "Your Highness, listen to me explain. It's not what you think. You drank the wine." At this moment, Celicia suddenly spoke. "It's so hot." Moen widened his eyes and looked at her, not sure what was wrong with her now. Celicia seems to be not very conscious. She held her flushed face in her hands, stuck out her tongue, and her eyes were hazy. She said to him in a daze, "My body wants to..." The Celicia in front of him was a completely different person from the one just now. Moen realized that her current state was not right and thought she might be sick. He quickly propped himself up on the ground with his hands, trying to get up. "No! This state is incorrect! Your Highness, hold on, I'll go call a doctor right away." Celicia seemed to know he wanted to leave, so she used ice magic to fix his hands on the ground. She slowly climbed onto Moen's body, gently touched his body with her hand, and then gently grasped his neck. "Your body is so cold. I like it." Moen was pressed under her, and her hands were imprisoned by ice magic, unable to move. He looked at her nervously. "Your Highness, wake up! Your Highness!" "Ariel, protagonist, help me quickly. If it continues like this, it's just a show and a real thing." Suddenly, Celicia bent down, pressing one hand on his shoulder and the other on his neck, and forcefully kissed Moen. Moen was extremely shocked, and a slight blush also appeared on his face. He never expected such a thing to happen. At this moment, somewhere in the Duke's mansion, the sound of fast walking resounded in the corridor. Then a familiar voice rang out. "Come on!" Ariel hurriedly walked down the hallway looking for a bathroom while wiping her skirt with a handkerchief. She lowered her head and looked at her dirty skirt, muttering to herself, "My dear Leah, how could she be so careless? The cake got all over my skirt." At this moment, Ariel stopped. She sensed a hint of something wrong. She looked up ahead and seemed to notice that there was someone staring at her in the area. The corridor in front of her was empty, only bright candle holders quietly illuminating the corridor. The doors of the rooms in the hallway were also tightly closed, as if no one was here. However, Ariel could clearly perceive that there was indeed someone's aura here. She looked around carefully for a moment and then asked a question towards the hallway. "Who is it? Who is here?" At this moment, a maid slowly walked out of one of the rooms. "Excuse me, miss." Anne closed her eyes, touched her chest with one hand, and politely bowed to Ariel. She kindly reminded her not to go any further. "This is a forbidden area of the Duke's mansion. Please turn back." Ariel expressed doubts about this. Is there any place in the vast Duke Campbell's mansion that guests cannot enter? She didn't know she had gone where she shouldn't have gone. Forbidden area? She continued to inquire curiously. "What kind of forbidden area is this?" Anne looked at her with a smile on her face and calmly answered her question. "Sorry, this is a confidential matter of the Duke's mansion. I'm not authorized to explain." Upon hearing that Anne was unable to provide her with clear information, Ariel hugged her chest with both hands and looked at Anne with a slightly unhappy expression. She whispered a sentence. How stingy. At this moment, Anne noticed the stains on Ariel's skirt. She squatted in front of Ariel and observed her dress. "Miss, it seems like your skirt is dirty," Ariel replied. "Yeah, I'm looking for a bathroom." Anne offered to help her clean her skirt. "Let me help you with this small matter." She reached out her hands and approached Ariel's dress, gathering magical energy in her own hands. clean. The green magic energy cleaned the stains off Ariel's dress, making it look as clean as it had been washed. Ariel lowered her head and looked at Anne's ability to cast magic, feeling somewhat surprised. She didn't expect the Campbell family to be so powerful that even the hired maids could use magic, she said with a slight surprise. "Oh, worthy of the Campbell family. Do all maids know how to use magic?" Anne withdrew her hand and humbly replied, "I only know a little, not worth mentioning." After cleaning Ariel's skirt, Anne stood up and took out a handkerchief to wipe her hands. She smiled and said to Ariel, who was still looking at her dress, "It's already cleaned, miss. Also, let me remind you, in a little while, the banquet will offer a limited number of pachichi cakes. If you like it, please don't miss it." Pachichi cake. Upon hearing the name of this cake, Ariel's eyes suddenly lit up. She clenched her two small fists excitedly, and her saliva couldn't stop flowing. She was very happy to be able to eat her favorite dessert at Duke Campbell's mansion. She was worried that the limited number of cakes would be sold out, so she quickly turned around and prepared to run back to the hall. She turned slightly and waved to Anne, saying goodbye to her. She smiled and expressed her gratitude for cleaning her dress just now. "Thank you for your help, Miss Maid. I have to go grab the cake." Anne also waved her hand gently. "You are welcome. Take care." Anne smiled as she watched her leave, until Ariel's figure gradually faded away and disappeared at the end of the corridor. Then she put down her hand. She withdrew her smile, turned back indifferently, and looked towards a certain part of the hallway, as if there was some unspeakable secret there. Ariel ran forward while recalling her interaction with Anne just now. She had actually noticed something strange about Anne. Since she didn't want to care too much about the Campbell family, she didn't say anything. She whispered, "That maid is a bit strange. She has a bloody smell on her body, and the other person hiding is also a bit suspicious. But what does this have to do with me? Anyway, she's causing trouble at the Duke's mansion, so it definitely won't involve me. As for Her Highness Celicia, well, Her Highness is already such a mature person, and she is also a young and top-notch magical genius. Can she still be eaten by that stupid playboy?" She noticed Celicia taking Moen's hand and leaving the ball. However, she didn't worry too much about Celicia's safety, considering the power of her abilities. In summary, Ariel's main concern now is the limited quantity of pachichi cakes. If she doesn't run faster, she's worried that she'll be robbed by other nobles. She firmly looked ahead and quickened her running speed. "Now! Nothing is more important than my pachichi cake. I'm coming." "My dear Pachichi." In a dark room in the hallway, the short-haired maid was holding a dagger and leaning against the wall. She tilted her head and listened cautiously to the movements outside the door. It seems that as soon as someone breaks in, she will immediately kill them. Until Ariel's footsteps had disappeared into the hallway, she whispered to the long-haired maid, "That girl has left. Is she also your mission target?" The long-haired maid answered her. "No, she was originally the target of number 9. Number 9 was my former partner, so I know some information about her." The long-haired maid was kneeling on one knee. She gathered magical energy on her fingers and drew a red magic formation on the ground. She seemed to be trying to invade the Campbell house through the magic circle. When the short-haired maid heard her mention the code name, she remembered something that happened earlier. "Number 9, I remember it was a mission failure." The long-haired maid knew what she was talking about, so she continued her words. "Right. It's that girl who surpassed her by 2 great realms but was killed in return." After confirming that there were no more people outside the corridor, the short-haired maid retracted the dagger at her waist. As soon as the maid with long hair reminded her, she knew who she was referring to. Then she realized that the long-haired maid had been drawing magic circles for a bit too long. She turned her head and frowned slightly, reminding the long-haired maid to pay attention to the time. It turns out to be her. "By the way, how much longer do you need?" "There is not much time left for us." The long-haired maid answered her. "Soon." After all, it was something laid down by the Lionheart King Ron Campbell. Although it is a massive object covering the entire duchy, it is not so easy to quietly open the gap without disturbing him. The short-haired maid seems a bit anxious. She urged the long-haired maid to move faster. "We need to hurry up. If Moen Campbell or Princess Cilicia suddenly come out, our mission will be considered a failure." Due to the fact that drawing magic circle consumes a lot of her energy, the long-haired maid cannot immediately invade the Campbell family. Some sweat dripped down her face as her fingers sped up the drawing of the magical array. However, she doesn't seem to be worried about not having enough time. "I know, but I think there's still plenty of time. Just now, when I was exploring the exterior wall, it seems like they are doing that kind of thing." The long-haired maid remembered when she was secretly observing them outside just now. She looked through the window of Moen's room and saw what was happening inside. The short-haired maid didn't understand what she was saying for a moment. She asked her in confusion, "That kind?" At this moment, in the room, Cilicia, who was unconscious, was lying on Moen's body and forcibly kissing him. Moen was pinned down by her, unable to move at all. He was still in shock from her kiss.